Hello, my friend, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Fool Rides Again, the podcast where I, Jinx, your host and imaginary friend, answers the burning question of what happens when you release a rider into the wild and he gets a chance to explore the world. So if you're interested in plot development, world building, character creation, or even character motivation, then this is the podcast for you, so please stay tuned. Starting off this episode, I will answer the burning question from last episode of what happens when you release a rider into the world and he gets a chance to explore the world of transportation and public train systems. With that being said, let's get the show on the road. Let's start off with a couple scenarios. Imagine you're an individual who was invited to go visit your buddy at his hometown. And it's a town you've never been to before, so you don't know any locations or any landmarks or anything like that. You can pull up GPS and try to navigate around town, but you don't really want to rely on that. And you also don't want to drive. But when you book your tickets, you realize that the airport is like 20 miles away from his house. And you think to yourself, you're going to have to rent a car to be able to go visit him. But you really don't want to do that because you don't want to drive. So you start asking questions and you realize, you don't really have to rent a car because there is a train that goes directly to the airport that will take you close enough to your buddy's house. So you buy a pass to the train instead for $15 for the weekend, and it takes you right to his house. Let's expand upon that scenario a little bit for this next one. Imagine you're visiting a city that has a lot of tourist attractions in it, but none of them are really close together. So you wonder about it, and you don't really want to walk to them all because that'll take time, and you'll miss out on being able to see all the attractions the town has to offer, the museums and the statues and the monuments and all that stuff. But you realize the town offers a fantastic underground subway system, and you can actually buy an unlimited day pass that will just allow you to hop on the subway at one stop and it'll take you right to the next stop where you can find another museum. After you go to that museum, you can hop on the subway and go to the next one. And because of this subway system, you're able to go to all the museums and monuments over the course of the weekend. And if you hadn't relied on that, you either would have been spending a lot of money on Uber, or you would have spent a lot of time walking, and you would have missed most of the attractions. How about this scenario instead? Imagine you're an individual who just graduated high school, and luckily you got a job offer for a pretty good gig in a new town. And this town is actually a very big city. So you use all your savings you have to move across the country to this new big city so you can start your job. And you find a little apartment to rent. But your apartment's nowhere near your job. And since you used all your savings to get there, you don't actually have the money to afford a car. You go to try to rent a car, and you realize you're not old enough to rent a car, and you're stuck here thinking, how am I supposed to get to work and home and the grocery store and all these other places I have when I can't afford a car? You rack your brain on it, and you're looking up one day and you see, there's a subway system that runs on the rails above the city, above the streets and all that. And you look further into it and you realize you can actually get a monthly train pass using this system, and it will actually take you wherever you need to go. It will take you to your job. It will take you to your house. It will take you to the grocery store. And sure, you may have to walk a little bit here and there, but walking a few blocks is better than trying to walk several miles or trying to go grocery shopping on a bicycle or things like that. And you start looking at the train system as your savior. So it saves you money in the long run and it'll allow you to eventually afford your own car. How about this scenario instead? You got accepted into a really elite college. And you go to college, and like the earlier scenario, you don't have the money to afford a car. And even if you did, this college doesn't allow you to have a car until you are in a certain grade. You can't have one as a freshman. So you get there, and one day your friends that you just met in class are like, hey, we're going to go catch a movie this weekend. Do you want to go? And you think to yourself, you really do, but how are you going to get there? In fact, you actually voice the question to the group. You're like, I don't have a way to get there. And like, you don't know? You can just hop on the bus that stops at the dorms every day and it'll take you right to the theater and the mall. And you think to yourself, I never noticed the bus. What happens next? With the scenarios for now, to the point behind them. I don't know about you, but I have relied on public transportation most of my life, and it has involved all forms of the ones I've mentioned in my story and scenarios. When I graduated high school, I really did go to a school following that required me to take a bus to the mall and go downtown. We couldn't have a car for a long time there, so we had to have some way to get around place. And my friends and I would frequently just hop on the bus and take it to the mall, and we would go see a movie there, or we would go shopping for clothes or hang out, get food or anything like that. And it was kind of nice because we didn't have to pay for gas, and it was nice. In fact, it was even better because that bus, since it was a bus for the school and we were students, we didn't have to pay for it. It was just free, included with our lodging and everything like that. So taking a bus downtown and everything and not having to pay for it, it was nice. Didn't have to pay for gas, didn't have to drive or deal with traffic, didn't have to deal with parking or anything like that. We would just be able to go downtown whenever we wanted, with exceptions. It was still a bus, so you had to wait on the bus schedule, meaning things had to line up when the bus would be there. Either movies, you'd make sure you left early enough so you got to the station and the theater in time for them to start, and you would have to make sure things ended early enough so you could still catch the bus home. But overall, it was a nice experience, and we loved it, and I relied completely on it. After that, I moved to a city that really was full of museums and everything. And tourists would frequently go there and want to go to all the museums. And it was easy to navigate around because you can take the underground train system wherever you needed to go, within reason. It didn't stop directly at every museum. It would stop in neighborhoods next to it. So you'd have to walk a few blocks here and there. You could buy your monthly pass, and it would give you pretty much unlimited rides for the month. And then the next month, you would do it again. And it wasn't restricted just to the city itself. It would actually take you to other cities around it. And like the other scenario with the bus, you were mainly restricted by the schedule of the trains. On weekends, you would have more trains going. Weekdays, not as many. And it didn't run all night long, so you'd have to make sure you ended things early enough. Or you arrived in a city and you went out drinking and you realized the train stopped running. So now I have to actually call an Uber to get me home because I was dumb and missed my train. It happens. Moving into the next two scenarios. When I visited my buddy for his wedding a couple months back, I did take a train from the airport to the city. And then I took the same train back to the airport. The train ride itself was like an hour long, but it was nice because I didn't have to pay for parking. I didn't have to drive and deal with traffic or anything like that. Didn't have to return a rental car. Didn't have to pick up a rental car. I could just hop on the train, grab a seat, and ride it to my destination. Convenient. Yes, I had to pay a couple bucks for it, but it saved me in the long run. And then getting to the actual city where his wedding was, there really is a subway system above ground, above all the streets and everything. You could take the subway and all that, grab a monthly pass, and go wherever you needed to. Why not use it? Students would take it going to school. People would take it going to the grocery store. People would take it going to work, going home, wherever they needed to go. Because there was a convenient system to get around town. It also limited how many cars were actually on the road because more people were using public transportation. And as for the last tidbit there, I don't know how it is everywhere, but in the States, you generally have to be 25 to rent a car. You could be younger to rent a moving truck, but no one really wants to drive a moving truck around a very crowded city. So if people need to get around town and they can't buy a car or afford it or even rent a car because they're too young, there should be a way to get around town besides a bicycle, and a train system public transportation, bus system, or anything like that is a great way to help with that. They can save them money so they can eventually save up to buy a car, but it has to exist for them to be able to do that in the first place. Or they're walking or biking everywhere or trying to call an Uber, and that adds up in price. As a rider, a train system, transportation system, or anything like that doesn't seem very important in the long run. But it's a small tidbit that you can throw into your stories. Into the world you design some kind of system to help your people get around town that doesn't involve driving. And it's also a great way to interact with other people. When you're driving, you generally have one person in the car. You might have a couple more for a family or things like that, but I don't know how much you pay attention to it. Most people spend more time in the car alone than with others. If you're a college student, you may drive to school and all that by yourself. If you're a high school student, when you first get your driver's license, you either have to drive by yourself or with like a family member. You can't drive with your friends for the first couple of months until you get more experience with it. So you're driving by yourself or with family. When you can drive with other people, you're still driving yourself to school. So you're either driving by yourself to school or you're driving by yourself to somewhere else to pick up someone to drive to school. Going to work. People don't always carpool to work. Most people don't. They drive by themselves to work. If they're carpooling, they either drive by themselves to the location where the carpool starts, or they have the van and they're driving by themselves to pick up other people. So you spend a lot of time by yourself in a car. But if you include a public transportation system, that's not an option. Yes, you may be the first one on a subway from a small spot, and you might be the only one in the train car for a moment, but come to the next stop, another person's likely to get on. There are very few times in my life that I spent an entire train ride by myself. Others get on the train with me at some point. On a bus, very few times that I've been on a bus by myself for the entire bus ride. Others get on and others get off. So in a story, that is easy to work with. If you include a public transportation system like that, it gives you a great opportunity to invite other people into your story. If your MC is there on the bus, someone else can walk on and start picking a fight with someone else. And this gives your MC an opportunity to play the hero. He can go help the other person and fight or stop this fight that's going on and now look like a hero. It could become a romance from that. Oh, look, rescue the damsel in distress. And now romance happens. It could be a horror story. Oh, look, you went to go stop a fight and you realize the fight was not between two people. It was between two monsters, and now you're being chased by one of those monsters. It could be action. There's a fight going on between highly trained individuals, and you go and start fighting in here, and now there's this giant action scene going on this bus that results in you winning, and your character gets off the bus, and he learns that he picked a fight with the wrong organization. But what the organization doesn't realize is that they picked a fight with the wrong individual because he is highly skilled, and he can continue on with his action story. But all this happens is because you had public transportation in your story. It gives you something to work with. It gives you a basis, a foundation, a meeting point. If you had a car and your individual is driving by himself in the car, what's he going to do about it? He's not going to have a chance to play the hero because there's no spot for it in that. He can't pick a fight with the wrong individual because there's no one else in the car. You have to try a lot harder to bring your characters together. But with public transportation, it's not as much of an issue. And you can play with a whole bunch of other stories like that. If your character doesn't want to be the hero, maybe your character is late to work and it misses an important deadline because he got stuck on a train. When I was in the city visiting my buddy a couple months back for his wedding, I learned that it was very common for students to be stuck on the train and miss school or be late to school because someone committed suicide on the tracks. I never thought of that, but that is something you can include in your story just by building a public transportation system into it. Does your MC have an important meeting has to get to so he can get his investors on board, but he misses it because he can't get there in time because someone died on the tracks? And because of that, he can't afford his loans and all of that? Or how about this? Your MC misses his own wedding because someone committed suicide on the tracks. And when he eventually gets to his wedding venue, no one else is there. He tries to make up with his significant other only for them to reject him because he was late, and they don't believe his excuse that someone died on his way there and he had no other way to get there. Mind you, this is not completely realistic. I can't imagine too many people relying on public transportation to get to their own wedding. At least not at a fashion that they would be late. They'd probably get there a lot earlier. I'm not married, can't say this for sure. Haven't been to every wedding, so I can't say that for sure. But it is a possibility. And it leads to other questions. I'm not saying public transportation has to be the end-all, be-all for your story, but it is something to consider when writing a story. How does your person and characters get around town? Do they have to drive everywhere? Maybe. Are they in a big enough city that it makes sense that there needs to be public transportation to limit how many cars are on the road? Maybe. Are they in a small enough town that doesn't even make sense? Does your town only have like 300 people? You probably don't need a giant rail system for that. You might have a bus, if that. But if you live in New York City, you have all of it. You have buses, you have trains, you have taxis, and all that stuff. So you can include how much transportation you have in your city based on how large your city is. Combine them, have fun with them, make it what it is. It's your city, and you can even change it based on what your time frame is. All my scenarios are kind of based on present time. But if you're to jump into the future, your public transportation might be vehicles that hover and flying aircraft and all this stuff that gets you around. Instead of a bus that relies on tires, it now flies through the city, stopping directly at houses because it has more freedom and leeway to do that. If you go further back in time, it may not be as realistic or something that happened. Inside the town itself, you might decide to introduce a carriage system. A carriage that stops somewhere and then everyone going to work hops on the carriage. It takes them the distance to their work and drops them off, and then back and forth. A carriage pulls people to and from places. It's a transportation system that kind of fits the time frame. So you can kind of play around with it. How? So with that being said, how do your people get around town? I don't expect you to answer for me, but at least consider it when writing your next story. How are your people navigating? And is your transportation the most feasible way for them to do it? Or is your transportation limiting how they're actually interacting with others? Things to play with. That being said, it's getting to that point in the show where I have to start calling it a day. But before I do let you go, my friend, I have a writing prompt for you. And for this writing prompt, I'm going to play with one of my scenarios from earlier. Write a story about an individual who was late to his own wedding because someone died. What happens next? I don't care what genre it is, horror, fantasy, or romantasy. I don't care the format, long fiction, flash fiction, short fiction, or poetry. All I care about is that you make the most of it and have fun with it. As writers, that's what we should be doing, is just having fun with the craft. If it turns into something bigger, sweet. I'll root for you. If not, I'll still cheer you on. But now it really is time for me to call it a day, my friend. So if you enjoyed the content of this week's episode, please like and subscribe. And if you want further content, visit my website at jinksdworld.com. That is JINKSDWORLD.com. And be on the lookout for the next episode where Jinx explores the world of the Amazon. I look forward to having you tune in. Ta-ta and have a good one.